Okay, good day everyone. You're welcome for today's maths class. I'm very much excited to have you back in class today. We're going to be discussing a very interesting and lovely topic in maths today, quadratic equations. This topic is often seen in the senior secondary section, where you're expected to actually go through a series of subtopics under this topic. So we are going to go through them step by step and be able to understand all the dynamics around this particular topic. It's a very interesting topic and one that is often seen in your external exam. So if you're in SS1, SS2, SS3, you are going to see this topic in your curriculum. We'll take off immediately. We have outlined the lesson objectives for this topic. The first thing we have there is the meaning of an equation. And on my right hand side, I have the meaning here already stated. I said here that an equation is a mathematical sentence that contains an equals symbol. So whenever we write a sentence, a math sentence could be x plus 1 is equal to 6, for instance. As long as a math sentence has an equal symbol in it, it is termed an equation. That's what makes an expression an equation. Now, you will realize that in every mathematical sentence, we have what we call the variable. So the variable here is called x. It could be any letter of the alphabet. Some persons could use A, B, Y, and so on and so forth. But x is always a common alphabet that is used in maths. Okay, so the very first lesson objective has been handled. We go into the second objective, which is meaning of a quadratic equation. What is a quadratic equation? A quadratic equation, simply put, a quadratic equation is that type of equation or math sentence, in which the power, the highest power of x or any unknown used in the equation is 2. The highest power of the variable there. Remember, if we don't call this a variable, we can also refer it to as being an unknown. An example of a quadratic equation is now x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. Now you could see a difference between the first equation we've written and the second one. The highest power of x in this one is called 1, while the highest power of a variable in this particular equation is 2. So whenever an expression is written, it contains an equal symbol, it becomes an equation. And then if in that equation the highest power is 2, we call that equation a quadratic equation. We are done with this. Let's go back to general form of a quadratic equation. There is a standard form every quadratic equation must have. The standard form of a quad equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We call this the general form or format every quadratic equation must take. And we are going to take our time to also define all these terms here. So the general form has been stated. It means that when you are given a quadratic equation, it is expected to have a term in x squared, is expected to have a term in x, and now it's expected to have a number only. We are going to take our time to explain this, and we're going to take our time to explain what this, and this actually stand for. The first term here, ax squared, is the term, we call it the term of x squared. This a is called the coefficient of x squared. And what does this coefficient mean? It is just a number that is beside x squared. It could be 2, it could be 1, it could be 3, or whatsoever. But any number you see that is written beside x squared, we call it the coefficient of that x squared. So invariably means that this a here is actually a number, a value that is going to be given. We are done with this term here. Let's go back to the second term. Remember, let me also keep in your mind, when a number is not written here, it means that the coefficient of this particular x squared is going to be 1. Let's go for the second term, which we have as plus bx. This is called the term of x. Now, in the term of x, this plus b is referred to as the coefficient of x, which is also, as we said in this case, the number beside x. Do not forget, whenever you are picking the coefficient or the number beside a variable, you must pick it alongside its sign. Very, very vital. That is one common mistake many students make. You give them plus 2x. You are going to ask them, what is the coefficient of x? They just say 2. You must call the sign with it. So that if you have something like minus 2x and somebody tells you what's the coefficient of x, you see somebody calling just 2. Whereas there is a sign beside that variable as well. So please, we must take note of some of these key items that also make students fail in an exam. And then the last term, which is plus c, we call this the constant term. We call this the constant term. And what is the constant term? It's just a number that stands on its own. A number on its own. Okay, so with that, we have rounded off with the general form of a quadratic equation. We go over to the methods of solving a quadratic equation. We go over to the methods of solving a quadratic equation. Methods. There are basically 4 methods. The first one is called the factorization method. The first one is called the factorization method. The second one is called the completing the square method. The completing the square method. Completing the square method. The third method is the one we say we use the almighty formula, and that's the one we're going to be considering today, the almighty formula. And of course, the final method is the graphical method, the use of the graph in solving a quadratic equation. Okay, so we've just listed the methods that are peculiar or obtainable in the solution of a quadratic equation. That's just about this. Now we are on this. The fifth objective, we have the roots of a quadratic equation. What are the roots of a quadratic equation? These roots is another name that is usually used to describe the answers or the results gotten from the solution. The result gotten from the solution of a quadratic equation. So you're going to be hearing me use this terminology often. Find the roots of a quadratic equation. It means solve that quadratic equation and get us your answers. The results gotten from the solution of a quadratic equation. And then take note, the solution of a quadratic equation will always give you 2 answers because of the power of this x is 2. So always take note of that. Whenever you solve a quadratic equation, you're going to obtain 2 answers. We are done with the roots, or the explanation of what the roots actually stand for. Now we have the introduction of the almighty formula. And that is the third method. We are going to use this method today to solve quadratic equations. We introduce the almighty formula. Another name for the almighty formula is the one you call the formula method. And that is oftentimes the best method students enjoy using to solve quadratic equations. The formula is stated thus, that x is equal to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, recall these letters were all gotten from the general form of this quadratic equation, which means whenever we have a, we are going to be looking out for the coefficient of x squared. When we have b, we're going to be looking out for coefficient of x. And when we have c, we're going to have the constant term. Just substitute them and get your answer. It's very easy. So we have introduced the almighty formula. We may have time to also prove how this formula was gotten, but for the purpose of solving questions in an exam, you don't need to get into the whole nitty-gritties of how to prove this. Okay, so its description. We'll just say a couple of things about the description, even though I had done it earlier here. B stands for the coefficient of x. A stands for the coefficient of x squared, and C is your constant what? 10. Notice that I have put a bracket here, that bracket is because of this negative sign here. Once there's a negative sign, it is always expected to introduce a bracket because this negative sign is going to affect every other thing there that comes afterwards. So take note of this. And the common mistake students make is that this horizontal bar here, they always start it off halfway. It must cover everything completely. So please take note of these things because they are minute details that many students don't take note of. It's very key. Okay. Now, we're going to dwell a little bit on this thing inside this radical symbol, b squared minus 4ac. We call this the discriminant. The discriminant, that's the name of this. Now, we use this to know what kind of roots or answers we are going to obtain when we solve a quadratic equation. If this b squared is equal to 4ac, that is, you substitute the value of the coefficient of x, square it, and eventually you multiply 4 times the coefficient of x squared and the constant, and they are the same. We say you are going to have what we call coincident or equal roots. You're going to have what we call coincident or equal roots. But when b squared is greater than 4ac, this is going to give us real and distinct roots. We are going to have what we call real and distinct roots. And on the other hand, when b squared is less than 4ac, this will give us imaginary or complex roots. We're going to solve questions that will also buttress some of these things eventually. So we are done with the description of this almighty formula. Please take note of this. I know so many people will be wondering, why do we call it almighty? It looks very imposing anyway, and that's why many students feel a little bit funny whenever they see the topic, especially because of the plus or minus. But the plus or minus here tells you you're going to have two answers. One is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. It's just as simple as that. Okay, so let's get into the final thing, the solution of a quadratic equation using the almighty formula. Let's learn how to apply this now in the solution of a quadratic formula. I hope you don't mind if I clean this other one. Okay, so we're going to just take a question immediately and buttress the solution of a quadratic equation. Let's take a question immediately. I have x squared minus 4x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now you see that this looks exactly like the general form of a quadratic equation. I have cleaned it there. Let me write it here, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, we are going to learn how to solve this quadratic equation using this almighty formula. But before you commence the solution of a quadratic equation using the almighty formula, the first thing you need to identify are these letters, which are these constants, a, b, and c. What values are they? And to get those letters, you compare them with the general form of a quadratic equation. Remember what I told you? So which means for the term of x squared, we'll find out what a is standing for, we'll find out what b is standing for, and we'll find out what c is. So there is no coefficient or number beside this x squared. Remember I told you, whenever there is no number, the number is always 1. So our a here is corresponding to 1. I hope you can see it. And then our b here is corresponding to minus 4, not just 4. And then our constant term here is 3. Now that we have the values of a, b, and c known, we can now put them into this equation and solve. So x is going to be minus, what is our b? Minus 4 plus or minus square root of, our b is also minus 4 squared minus, remember to introduce your brackets, we have 4 times a is 1 and c is 3 all over 2 times 1. Let's run along. So my x is equal to, when minus meets minus, it's going to turn to plus 4 plus or minus square root of minus 4 squared is minus 4 times minus 4, which will give you 16, minus 4 times 1 times 3 will give you 12. All over 2 times 1 is 2. So we're going to have plus 4 plus or minus square root of 4 all over 2. This plus or minus means you're going to split it into 2 ways. Now let's find the square root of 4. This is going to give us plus 4 plus or minus 2 all over 2. Our answer is very much handy now. So we're going to have two answers. X1 will be to use the plus minus 4 plus 2 all over 2, and x2 is going to be the use the minus, plus 4, sorry, this is plus 4, plus 4 minus 2 all over 2. So plus 4 plus 2 is going to give you plus 6 all over 2, which is plus 3. And plus 4 minus 2 is going to give you plus 2 all over 2, which is going to give you 1. So your answer here is that x is either plus 3 or 1. I hope you enjoyed that process. In our next class, we're going to introduce other methods we're going to use to also solve quadratic equation. Please feel free to share, like, and comment so that others can also watch the video. Thank you for watching. God bless you.